Act 1. The Invitation. Segment 1. The moors were silent, except for the whistle of the wind through the gorse and the hollow moaning of distant hills. Dusk draped itself like a bruise across the Yorkshire landscape, and the narrow road that led to Whitby narrowed even further as it wound past ragged stone walls, ancient oaks, and black pools reflecting the dying sky. Finn Harlow's Volvo ate the road cautiously, tires crunching on the gravel, headlights slicing through the dim. He had left London that afternoon, needing nothing more than the solace of isolation, a weekend with nothing to answer to but the chill of the moor air and the taste of peat from the old village pubs. He thought he had planned a simple retreat, an unremarkable weekend to write, to think, to be alone. The cottage appeared abruptly through the mist, a squat, grey building, its roof tiled unevenly, chimneys like stubby fingers pointing at the bruised sky. Finn parked at a precarious angle, the Volvo's lights illuminating the uneven stone path. The front door bore an envelope, not resting on the doorstep, not tacked casually. It was nailed to the oak, crimson against grey wood. Finn's hands lingered on the steering wheel, the air thick with an instinctive unease. He slid out, boots crunching on frost-hardened soil, and approached. The envelope's wax seal gleamed in the last light, and his name was carved on its surface in jagged letters, a script that seemed alive, as if it had been scratched by a talon rather than a pen. Finn, monologue. To audience, someone carved my name. This isn't mail. It's a summons. The wind flung itself against the cottage, and Finn hesitated only a heartbeat before tearing the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy parchment. I've tasted your routine, Finn. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the ruined abbey on the cliff. Come alone, or I come inside. DN. The paper smelled faintly of smoke, of something bitterly metallic, and Finn's chest tightened. He lit the hearth and set the letter to flame. The fire consumed it hungrily, twisting and curling as if alive. But when the ashes settled, they spelled out two letters, stark and black. DN. He froze, hands trembling. The firelight danced across the stone walls, shadows stretching like long fingers toward him. He tried to rationalize. A prank? A mistake? But the letter, the carvings, the precise, almost clinical threat, none of it felt human in origin. Finn moved to the window, peering into the gathering night, the moor a grey wash of fog and shadow. Nothing stirred. He could almost convince himself it was over. Almost. Later, as he showered in the cramped bathroom upstairs, the ordinary warmth of water against his skin did little to soothe the creeping dread. The clock ticked past 9:17 p.m. Then, the doorbell rang. A scream sliced through the quiet. Finn froze, the hiss of water pausing in the pipes. He opened the door. No one. Only the moor and the wind and the distant cry of an owl. And then, a scratching at the bathroom window 3 floors above the ground. Finn's heart sunk, blood rushing to his temples. He yanked the curtain aside, and there it was, a gloved hand, pressing another note against the glass. Wet and dripping from the wind, the paper read, "You're late. I'm impatient. DN." Finn, to audience, he climbed the drainpipe. While I was naked, every instinct screamed at him. He moved through the house with methodical terror, checking locks, latches, corners. The balcony door, unlocked. Snow from outside had left a trail of wet footprints across the polished wood. And crouched on the railing, knife glinting in the feeble light of a broken lamp, a figure waited. Finn acted without thinking, smashing the lamp into the intruder's face. Glass shattered, sparks flew. The man vaulted the banister with unnatural grace and sprinted across the moor, barefoot, leaving a trail of blood. By morning, the police found the knife embedded in the balcony, the blade engraved. For Finn, the intruder had vanished into the fog, leaving only one final, terrifying imprint on Finn's mind. Eyes that were mirrors of his own. Finn, to audience, bandaged, voice tight with disbelief, "He knows my face because it's his face." A twin I never had. And in the silence that followed, the moor seemed to lean closer. whispering secrets that Finn knew he did not yet understand. Segment 2. Finn didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on the narrow bed, bandages still wrapped around his hands where shards of glass had bitten into flesh, listening to the wind claw at the cottage. Every creak of timber, every sigh of the old roof seemed amplified. The fire had died hours ago, leaving only the cold, stone chill pressing through the floorboards. He stared at the ceiling, mind a loop of possibilities, none of them comforting. The note on the window had been precise. Come alone, and the thought of venturing out to that ruined abbey, ominous, skeletal on the cliff above Whitby, set his nerves into a relentless tremor. Still, he knew he had no choice. To ignore the summons was to invite whatever shadow had taken an interest in him into his home, perhaps for good. Morning arrived, grey and sullen. Finn dressed, pulling a thick woolen coat around his shoulders. Boots laced, scarf wrapped tight, he stepped out onto the moor. Fog clung low, swirling around the heather and bogs, muting the color of the landscape until everything seemed washed in slate and ash. The ruined abbey appeared through the mist like a jagged exclamation against the sky, its skeletal arches silhouetted against clouds. Finn's pulse quickened. Every instinct told him to turn back, to flee. But something deeper, something that wasn't courage, but curiosity, maybe necessity, drove him forward. The path to the abbey was treacherous, slick with dew and rotting leaves. Each step was measured, careful, yet the moor itself seemed to resist him. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground, bending, twisting, forming shapes that vanished when looked at directly. He kept muttering to himself, recounting old maps, recalling distances, rehearsing exit routes. His mind darted nervously from one thought to the next, each more frantic than the last. Halfway up the ridge, he heard it. A whisper, faint, almost carried on the wind. He froze, straining. Nothing. Just the moor, just the fog. Yet, the hairs on the back of his neck stood straight, and a tight knot of fear settled in his stomach. When he took the next step, something metallic scraped against stone, a soft, deliberate sound, slow, measured. He spun. Nothing. But the air smelled wrong, copper, like fresh blood, like something burned and iron-heavy. Finally, he reached the abbey. Its stone walls were jagged and broken, spires long collapsed. Inside, the floor was littered with rubble, grass and weeds forcing their way through cracks. Finn's boots crunched against loose stones, echoing through the empty halls. He paused in the center, heart thumping, and then he saw it, another note, pinned to a pillar with a rusted nail. The handwriting was the same jagged script. You're punctual. But are you prepared? DN. Finn swallowed, voice dry. Prepared for what? He muttered, though he already feared the answer. Movement flickered in the shadows. He froze again, eyes scanning, muscles taut. There was no sound beyond the wind, but the shadows shifted unnaturally, as if aware of him. And then a figure emerged, not quite solid, stepping from behind a collapsed archway. The intruder's face was obscured, but the eyes, dark, hollow, yet intensely familiar, locked onto Finn's. Finn's breath caught. The eyes were mirrors of his own. He moved backward, instinctively, until the figure lunged. Finn stumbled over rubble, narrowly avoiding a glinting blade. The intruder's movements were precise, deliberate, almost inhuman. Finn scrambled, grabbing a loose iron rod, swinging blindly. Metal clanged against stone, sparks flying, and the figure paused, tilting its head as if amused. Finn, to audience, he moves like me, thinks like me, knows me better than I know myself. Finn bolted toward a side corridor, the figure in silent pursuit. Each footstep echoed, each breath ragged. The corridor opened onto a crumbling balcony overlooking the cliff, the sea below a roiling dark mass. He stopped, chest heaving, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes. Behind him, the intruder appeared, knife raised, shadowed and almost spectral. The final confrontation came not with screams, but with a glance. The man mirrored Finn's own stance perfectly. Knife poised exactly as Finn might have if he had been the hunter. Time dilated, each heartbeat thundered in Finn's ears. And then instinct took over. He grabbed the broken flagstone, swinging it with all his strength. The intruder blocked with the blade, sparks flying as stone met steel. The wind carried a scream, not his, not entirely human, and the intruder stumbled, slipping on wet stone. Finn didn't pause. He lunged, chest forward, and the figure toppled over the edge. A scream echoed into the abyss, swallowed almost immediately by the wind. Finn collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, the taste of salt and fear on his tongue. But the moment of relief was fleeting. There, carved into the flagstone he had used, was a single, chilling message. For Finn. And as he crawled back into the ruined abbey, the fog shifting like living things around him, Finn understood something terrifying. The man, his twin, his mirror, had not fallen. He had not fled. He had vanished to return. Finn, to audience, whispering, voice trembling, he's out there. Waiting, watching. I can feel it in my own reflection. He left the abbey at dawn, boots soaked, hands scraped and bleeding, mind fraying at the edges. The moor seemed endless, each hill and hollow a potential trap. And when he reached the cottage that evening, the familiar comfort of home had been stripped away. The door was still, but the air smelled of iron and wet leather. He knew the figure had been there, or would be. He could not be sure which. Sleep, if it came at all, was a shallow, haunted thing. In the middle of the night, Finn woke to the sound of scraping at the windows again, the jagged echo of metal on stone. His reflection in the glass startled him, eyes wide, pale in the moonlight. But he was not alone. Behind him, shadowed, the outline of a man mimicked his stance perfectly, knife in hand, waiting. The terror of recognition was worse than fear itself. Finn understood. The game had just begun. Segment 3. Finn's days merged into a blur of paranoia and dread. Every shadow became a potential threat. Every gust of wind a herald of the intruder's return. He rarely left the cottage. And when he did, it was only under the cover of dense fog, boots sinking into mud, eyes scanning every ridge, every dip in the moor for signs of movement. Sleep remained elusive. When it came, it was shallow and fractured, filled with visions of knife-wielding silhouettes and mirrored faces. One night, hours before midnight, Finn heard the first soft tap on the window, so gentle it could have been mistaken for a falling branch. He froze, pulse hammering. The tap came again, deliberate, slow, patient. He approached the window, trying to force calm into his shaking hands. And there it was, another note, slipped between the frame and the glass, damp from condensation. He unfolded it, reading the familiar jagged letters. You cannot hide forever. Tonight, we finish what began. DN. Finn swallowed, feeling a chill creep down his spine. Tonight. That word carried more weight than any threat he had encountered. He tried to prepare himself. Knives hidden under the bed, a hammer on the hearth, a fire poker within reach. But he knew instinctively that no weapon, no barricade, would suffice. This was not a fight of strength. It was a fight of identity, of recognition, of mirrors. The wind grew stronger, flinging snow and frost against the cottage windows. Finn heard a faint scratching at the back door, but when he approached, nothing was there. Only footprints, bare, impossibly clean, appearing out of the frost as if etched by some invisible hand, led in a perfect circle around the house. He followed them, dread pooling in his stomach. The prince ended at the front door, vanished, leaving the air empty but tense, thick with anticipation. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then, the sound of a key turning. Finn bolted upright in bed, heart in his throat. But when he reached the door, it was locked. Locked as he had left it. He crept toward the stairs, each step a silent drum of anxiety. At the top, The door to the balcony was slightly ajar, snow wet on the frame. His pulse escalated. He peered out into the swirling fog. And there, crouched on the railing as he had seen once before, was the intruder. The figure's knife caught the moonlight. His face remained obscured, wrapped in shadows, yet Finn knew, he always knew, that it was the same reflection staring back at him. He drew a deep breath, fists clenched, trying to summon courage. Finn, to audience, he is me, but not me. My twin, born of the same void that I never knew existed. The intruder leapt toward the balcony door with impossible speed. Finn swung the hammer, meeting the attack with a crash that echoed across the moor. Snow sprayed like sparks as the struggle moved closer to the railing. They grappled, each blow mirrored, each movement almost ritualistic. Finn could feel the rhythm of the man's attacks, every feint a reflection of his own instincts. It was as if he were fighting a shadow, a living doppelganger that anticipated his every move. In a desperate bid, Finn shoved the intruder over the railing. The man vanished into the fog, a scream swallowed by the night. Finn collapsed, trembling, blood pounding in his ears. Relief, if it came, was fleeting. He knew the figure had not truly fallen. The moor was wide, the fog deep, and in that darkness, someone, or something, waited. Morning brought no clarity. Finn surveyed the balcony. Embedded in the snow was the intruder's knife, engraved once again, for Finn. Footprints circled the weapon, a mocking dance of inevitability. He realized that this was not a confrontation that could end with simple violence. This was a confrontation with himself, with the reflection of all the darkness he had ignored in his own life, crystallized into a single, stalking presence. He retreated indoors, seeking refuge in routine, in logic. Meals were hastily prepared, fires tended, every lock checked twice. But even in these small tasks, he felt the man's eyes on him, mirrored in every reflective surface. The mirrors of the cottage, the darkened windows, the chrome of his Volvo, they all betrayed him. He was never alone. As evening fell, the final act began. A knock at the door, soft but deliberate. Finn approached, heart hammering, expecting the intruder. The door opened slowly on its own. Fog poured into the hallway, cold and wet. And there, standing just beyond the threshold, was the man. Not attacking, not leaping, just watching. The figure's eyes were identical to Finn's. And in that moment, Finn understood fully. This was not merely a stalker. This was a reflection of the self he had never confronted, a twin born from his own shadow. Finn, to audience, I see him. I see me. And the question isn't whether he exists. It's whether I exist anymore. The figure spoke, voice a haunting echo of Finn's own. You thought you could burn the letter. You thought the mole would hide you. But I am always here. Finn's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to flee into the fog. But the moor, the cottage, the wind, they were traps of perception. The intruder was part of him now, and there was no separation. Hours passed like minutes. Finn sat, bandaged and shivering, eyes locked on the empty doorway, waiting, knowing, fearing. Eventually, the fog thinned. The man, or the shadow, was gone. The knife remained, a testament carved in iron, for Finn. And in the reflection of the polished floorboards, Finn glimpsed something that made his stomach seize, another set of footprints. Not his, not entirely, leading from the door toward the moor, vanishing into nothingness. The police, when they came the next day, found no intruder, no footprints beyond the balcony knife, no evidence of entry beyond the obvious struggle. Finn recounted his story, but they dismissed much as hysteria, a stress-induced hallucination. He knew better. The reflection in the glass, the knife, the footprints, they proved a truth more horrifying than disbelief. He had a twin, a mirror, a stalker born of himself, waiting for the moment when fear would weaken his resolve. Finn left the cottage reluctantly. The moor stretched endlessly. wine tearing through his coat, hands raw from frost. He glanced back once, and in the fading fog, he thought he saw movement. A silhouette, crouched, waiting, knife glinting. The realization struck with unbearable clarity. Wherever he went, whatever he did, the twin would follow. Finn, to audience, voice low, trembling with a mixture of fear and recognition, "He is me. I am him. And the Moors will remember us both." The first act closed not with violence, but with the inevitability of repetition, a cycle of mirrored terror that would not end. Finn walked down the path, boots sinking in mud, heart pounding, fully aware that somewhere in the fog, the eyes of Dean followed him, watching, waiting, reflecting every thought, every step, every heartbeat. And as the wind whipped through the skeletal trees, Finn understood the cruelest truth of all. This nightmare had only just begun. Act 2. The Red Wraith. Segment 1. The Transgran Pass twisted like a serpent through the Carpathians, its hairpin turns precarious above cliffs that drop sharply into black pine voids. Midnight had fallen long ago, but the clouds hung low and thick, hiding the moon. The only lights were the feeble beams of headlights cutting through fog, bouncing off ice patches and glinting briefly on wet asphalt. Leela was gripped the steering wheel of her rented Dacia, knuckles wide beneath leather gloves, heart hammering. Her body ached with exhaustion. 4 days of nearly sleepless driving had left her a hollowed-out version of herself. She just needed to reach Bucharest, to escape this stretch of nightmare roads. The pass was notoriously unforgiving, and Leela had learned to respect every curve, every jagged edge of rock that jutted over the roadside. Yet tonight, it seemed almost alive, every shadow morphing with intention, every gust of wind whispering warnings. The Dacia groaned on the icy asphalt as she leaned into a sharp bend, tires squealing, the roar of the engine drowned by the wind. She glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. A vehicle followed her, a blood-red Dacia Heen, limping slightly, headlights flickering like dying eyes. It matched her speed with impossible precision. Leela's stomach sunk. She had passed many vehicles over these days, but this one was different. There was something in the way it moved, not a mistake, not random, but deliberate, almost predatory. Leela, monologue, to audience, 4 days. No sleep. Just get home. Just get home. Her pulse surged. The Aheena's driver's window rolled down slowly, and a gaunt man's face appeared, lit intermittently by the flickering headlights. Bloodshot eyes, pale and sunken, a grin revealing far too many teeth. Leela's stomach turned. She had never seen him before, yet there was something familiar in the intensity of his stare, a recognition that made her skin crawl. She pressed the accelerator, pushing the Dacia to 160 kilometers per hour. The Aheen stayed glued to her tail, matching every move. The road narrowed further, cliffs rising sharply on one side, a sheer drop on the other. Ice patches gleamed treacherously under the headlights. Leela slammed the brakes for a tight hairpin turn, tires screeching on the ice. But the Aheen rammed her rear with force, spinning her dangerously toward the abyss. Panic took over. Leela countersteered, feeling the car lurch violently. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She spotted a tunnel carved into the mountain rock, a desperate gamble. Swerving inside, she hoped for shelter, for at least a brief reprieve. The tunnel's walls were slick with moisture, echoing her engine's roar and the scream of tires on rock. But as she emerged, the Aheen blocked the exit, headlights glowing like crimson eyes. The man stepped out, dragging a heavy chain that clinked ominously against the asphalt. He smashed the Dacia's side mirror, shards of glass spraying across the wet road. His voice sliced through the night, guttural, harsh, shouting in Romanian, "You were supposed to stop for me in La." Leela, to audience, whispering in disbelief, "La, I was never." There was no time for thought. Leela slammed the car into rivers, the chain whipping across the windshield in a shower of ice and glass, spider-webbing the glass. The Aheen lurched forward, but she rammed it, the chain catching the undercarriage, sparks flying like fire from a steel beast. She shot past him, engine screaming, tires barely gripping the ice. The pass narrowed further, and trees loomed closer. Leela's knuckles were raw, hands trembling. Every bend seemed endless, every shadow potentially hiding him. She reported the plate when she reached a small village hours later, breath coming in ragged gasps. Police promised investigation, but there was no record of the Aheen outside Romania, no sign of the man. It was as if he had evaporated from the world, leaving only terror behind. Days later, she learned the truth. The Aheen was registered to a missing American hitchhiker, last seen weeks before on a highway in the United States that Leela herself had driven. The man, someone who had tracked her route, reconstructed it meticulously from stolen dashcam footage. He had rebuilt her nightmare down to every kilometer, every bend, every hairpin turn. Leela, to audience, voice low, shaken, he rebuilt my nightmare from pixels. I was never safe. Not once. The psychological weight of realization was worse than the physical terror she had endured. Someone, somewhere, had watched her every move, documented it, and turned her life into a map of fear. Leela's dreams were haunted not by imagination but by meticulous recreation, a maniacal mirror reflecting her habits, her weaknesses, her routes. That night, she could barely sleep. Every engine's growl outside her apartment, every shadow across her blinds, became the red glow of headlights, the flicker of his smile. She replayed the past in her mind, every hairpin, every chain whip, every desperate maneuver. The memory was vivid, relentless, and she knew that somewhere, somehow, he was planning the next iteration of terror. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. No message, just a blank screen. And then a single photo appeared, her, asleep in the car, dashcam footage time-stamped, location pinpointed. She stared at it, frozen. He was still watching. Leela, to audience, whispering, voice trembling, the world outside is a map, and he knows every line. I can't escape what I never knew was being drawn. Outside, the wind howled through the Romanian mountains, carrying with it a faint metallic tang. Somewhere, the red Aheen waited, headlights flickering like dying eyes, engine idling silently. The man, patient and precise, had vanished into the dark, but only for now. Leela pulled the blankets tighter around herself, staring at the photo. Sleep would not come. Not tonight, not ever in the same way again. Segment 2. Sleep had become a stranger. Leela had driven for hours before dawn, her mind a taut wire of fear and adrenaline. Each hairpin turn of the Transgran Pass seemed to stretch longer than the last, cliffs yawning wider, the wind howling like a living predator. The Aheen's red glow had vanished, but she could still feel its presence, a shadow behind every curve. Every bend, every frost-flicked patch, every narrow escape replayed in her mind like a cursed loop. By late morning, Leela pulled over at a small clearing above a frozen waterfall, shaking, hands raw from gripping the steering wheel. She tried to call for help, but the mountains swallowed her signal. The pass was notorious not just for curves and cliffs but for its isolation. Help was miles away, delayed by fog and rockslide warnings. She remembered the voice in Romanian, the chain, the impossibility of escaping. Her breaths were shallow, her body taut, yet she forced herself to continue. She could not stop. The road narrowed again, cliff on one side, rock face on the other, ice forming jagged patches along the edges. And then, there it was. The Aheen emerged from a bend, headlights flickering like the eyes of some enormous, stalking predator. Leela's stomach dropped, pulse spiking. This time, he was closer, impossibly so, the distance closing as though the car itself bent physics to follow her. She floored the accelerator, tires spinning on frost, engine screaming. The man's grin appeared once more, wide and unnatural, teeth glinting in the cold light. Leela screamed into the night air, words swallowed by the wind. He wasn't just following her. He was predicting her every move, anticipating each curve, each break, each desperate countersteer. Leela, to audience, it's not skill. It's obsession. He's mapped me, memorized me, and now he dances ahead and behind at the same time. I don't just drive against him. I drive against my own life. She attempted a risky maneuver, tightening a turn, swerving onto the snowed-over shoulder. But the Aheen rammed her rear again, spinning the Dacia violently. Tires screeched, eyes flying, and the car teetered dangerously near the cliff's edge. Leela's mind screamed, reflexes honed by adrenaline and instinct taking over. She countersteered, spinning the wheel with all her strength, feeling the vehicle fight against physics itself. A tunnel appeared, a narrow slice through rock. With no time to hesitate, she swerved inside. For a moment, she thought she had escaped. But as her headlights pierced the black, she realized the Aheen had anticipated it. He was blocking the exit, engine idling, chain dragging across the asphalt, sparks scattering. Leela froze for a split second, mind racing. The man shouted again in Romanian, voice cracking with fury, "You cannot escape. You will stop for me." Panic surged. Leela reversed the car violently, the chain whipping across the windshield, glass spider webbing instantly. The red glow of the Aheen reflected in the ice on the tunnel walls. She rammed through, tires skidding, chain catching the undercarriage, sparks flying like fireworks of fear. Her heart thudded in her throat, every muscle burning, every sense hyper-alert. She escaped the tunnel, sliding around corners, barely keeping control of the car. The road narrowed further, cliffs and trees pressing in from both sides. But she kept moving, reporting the plate whenever possible, desperate to leave a breadcrumb trail of evidence. The Aheen, however, had vanished once again. It was as if the night itself had swallowed him. Days later, police confirmed what she had feared. The vehicle belonged to a missing American hitchhiker, last seen on the very highway in the US that she had driven weeks ago. The man was a copycat, following her through every kilometer, reconstructing her journey down to the smallest detail. Dashcam footage, personal routes, sleep schedules. He had catalogued it all. And in Romania, on a road that seemed almost impossibly isolated and dangerous, he had manifested as a living, relentless nightmare. Leela, to audience, voice low, horrified, he doesn't just hunt me. He builds me into his obsession. My life, mapped and mirrored. My terror a blueprint he follows to perfection. The psychological weight pressed on her relentlessly. She saw him not just on the road but in every reflection, every shadow. Driving home, she avoided mirrors, even turning away from shop windows, knowing he could be anywhere, waiting, patient. The realization that someone had reconstructed her life with such meticulous obsession shook her more than the near-death experiences ever could. Her sleep became fractured, each dream infiltrated by the red glare of headlights, the screech of tires on ice, the metallic shimmer of the chain. She could not escape the mental blueprint he had imposed on her existence. Every route she drove, every city she visited, every road she crossed, became another page in his ledger of obsession. The man had not merely followed her. He had studied her, memorized her habits, anticipated her fears. Leela's terror was both physical and psychological. Every moment of relief tainted by the knowledge that it was only temporary, a pause in a meticulously designed torment. She realized, slowly and horrifyingly, that escape was impossible in the conventional sense. Roads, borders, police, all meaningless against someone who had not just followed her but predicted her, had anticipated her actions in a way that suggested months, if not years, of preparation. Her past journeys, casual drives, seemingly mundane decisions, all of it had been recorded, watched, and weaponized against her. Leela, to audience, voice tight, breath ragged, every move I make, every road I take, he is there. Not behind me, not ahead, but in the map of my life, in the shadow of my choices. I am never alone. That night, back in a small, nondescript butcherist apartment, Leela stared at the dashcam footage she had recovered. Each frame of the hyena's relentless pursuit was burned into her mind, every tire mark, every flash of headlights, every moment of close contact. And then a single frame froze her completely. A shot of the man, sitting perfectly still in the red car, eyes staring directly at the camera. Not just watching her mind. Leela, to audience, whispering, voice trembling, "He has seen me as I am, as I cannot be, and he waits, patient, to finish the blueprint." Outside, the wind howled through the streets of Bucharest, a faint metallic scent in the air, almost like blood or rust. Somewhere, the hyena waited, headlights flickering like dying eyes. And the man, gaunt and unrelenting, had disappeared into the night. But only temporarily. Leela knew with absolute certainty that the map of her life had been drawn, traced, and memorized. The nightmare would continue. Sleep, if it came at all, was fragile and fleeting. Dreams were haunted by the sound of chain against metal, tires skidding on ice, headlights gleaming red in the fog. And through it all, the knowledge persisted. Somewhere in the night, he was building the next phase of the terror, waiting for the perfect moment to resume. Segment 3. Night had fallen again on the Trans-Grand Pass, black and merciless. Leela's Dacia hummed across the ice-slicked asphalt, tires gripping just enough to keep her alive. Every bend seemed more treacherous than the last, every cliff edge yawning wider, as if the mountains themselves were conspiring to trap her. Her pulse was a drum in her ears, breath short, hands raw from gripping the steering wheel. Yet she could not stop, not for rest, not for fear, not even for relief. The hyena was back, red headlights glinting through the fog like a predatory gaze. This time, the stalker had grown bolder. The chain in his hand flashed in the intermittent glow of the headlights. He screamed in Romanian, a guttural shout that carried over the wind. "You cannot escape. You belong to the map I have drawn." Leela's stomach knotted. She had long realized that she was more than just a target. She was a blueprint, a puzzle he had meticulously constructed over weeks, each turn of the road a move in his obsessive game. Leela, to audience, whispering, voice trembling, "He is everywhere. Not behind me, not in front. He is inside the very lines of my life, predicting, constructing, waiting for my every choice." She floored the accelerator, tires spinning, engine screaming, pushing the Dacia past limits of control. The car fishtailed on ice, sliding dangerously close to the cliff edge. She yanked the wheel, counter-steering with every ounce of skill and desperation. Sparks flew as the chain scraped against the undercarriage. The hyena lurched forward, relentless, every movement synchronized perfectly with hers. He knew her, anticipated her, mirrored her instincts. Leela spotted a series of narrow tunnels ahead, carved decades ago to bypass fallen rock. One by one, she plunged into them, hoping to gain temporary refuge. But each time, the hyena waited at the next exit, engine idling, headlights slicing through the darkness. His grin, too wide, too sharp, was illuminated briefly by passing light, eyes burning with uncanny recognition. Desperation became clarity. She realized she could not outrun him, could not hide. She had to fight on her terms, use the road itself as a weapon. As the pass narrowed further, cliffs rising sharply on one side, sheer drops on the other, she manipulated the terrain. Braking at the precise edge of a hairpin, she forced the hyena to overcompensate, tires spinning on ice. The car lurched, sparks flying, chain whipping across metal. Leela felt the balance of terror and control like a knife's edge against her palms. Leela, to audience, voice taut, every word measured, every decision, every movement, every second. This is the map. And tonight, I redraw the lines. She aimed for the narrowest tunnel, the one barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Sliding inside, she forced the hyena's car to the tunnel's edges. Sparks flew as it scraped the rock walls. She maneuvered with brutal precision, using the weight of her car and the chain's momentum to wedge it, briefly immobilizing the red vehicle. Leela's breath came in ragged gasps, body shaking, mind racing. For the first time, she had a fleeting sense of control. Then, with a metallic screech, the Aheen freed itself. The man leapt from the vehicle as she exited the tunnel, chain raised like a whip, gleaming under intermittent light. His voice tore through the fog, teeth bared in an unnatural grin. "You belong to me," Leela was. Always. Her foot hit the accelerator, sliding past him with inches to spare. Tires screamed, snow sprayed, wind whipped through her hair. She glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was gone, but not disappeared. He had vanished only to return in another form, another moment. He had anticipated her every escape, every maneuver, every calculated risk. Hours later, Leela reached a small village far below the pass. The Aheen was nowhere to be found. Exhausted, trembling, she reported the pursuit, leaving evidence, dashcam footage, tire marks, shards of glass. Police documented it, but there was no record of the man. The red car, the chain, the gaunt visage. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Yet the evidence in her mind was indelible. Each frame of memory, every brush with death, every near miss had been catalogued by him. He had reconstructed her life, her routes, and now her fear itself was a weapon. Leela realized that she could not undo what he had done. The map of her life was in his hands, and the nightmare could resume whenever he chose. Leela, to audience, whispering, voice tight with terror, "He mapped my life. Every curve, every choice, every moment I thought I was alone. He built me into his obsession. And now, I am just another waypoint on his journey." At night, she stared at her dashcam footage, frozen frames of the Aheen gliding behind her, every tire tracker calculated signature, every movement synchronized with her own. And then, the final horror. A photograph of herself asleep in the car, time-stamped, location exact, her private journey stolen and reconstructed by a man who had studied her. Outside, the wind cut through the streets of Bucharest. Somewhere, the red Aheen waited. Headlights flickered like dying eyes. And though the man had vanished from sight, Leela knew that he had not vanished from intent, from obsession. He was patient. He was precise. And he would return. She pulled the blanket tighter, staring at the photograph, shivering. Sleep would not come. Not that night. Not any night in the same way again. The Transgrand Pass had burned itself into her mind. The red Aheen, the chain, the gaunt, smiling man, they were no longer a memory, they were a presence. Leela, to audience, voice low, almost a whisper, "I survived the pass. But the map is complete. And somewhere, he is planning the next line, the next curve, the next terror. I cannot escape. I will never escape. The road is his, and I am just traveling it." The segment ends with Leela staring out at the city lights. But she does not see safety. She sees headlights in the fog, hears chains clinking, imagines every road she has ever driven forming the path of her obsession. Somewhere in the distance, the man waits. Patient, relentless. Dash. Act 3. The Snowbound Siege. Segment 1. The Jotunheimen mountains loomed like frozen sentinels under a bruised grey sky. Snow whipped horizontally across the ridges, cutting at exposed skin, and the howling wind carried a metallic tang that hinted of iron, frost, and the unnatural. Perched on a ridge like a shard of glass against the blizzard was the architect's cabin, its walls almost entirely made of transparent panes, reflecting the storm outside. Inside, Theo Grant, 31, crime podcaster, recorded meticulously every breath, every crackle of firewood, every gust of wind, every airy silence. He had chosen this place for isolation, for clarity, to uncover the stories he sought to tell. But isolation in these mountains came at a cost. The storm was relentless, and the wilderness surrounding the cabin seemed alive, pressing in with every gust. Theo's notebook lay open, ink smudged from condensation, yet he couldn't focus. Something was off. He sensed it. Footsteps. Not just random crunching in the snow, but a rhythm, circling, deliberate. He had noticed them the first night. Prints forming perfect circles around the cabin, never approaching the door. Theo, monologue. To audience, day 4. The prints stop at the deck. Then under it. Always under it. Someone is there. Watching. Night 5 brought it into terrifying clarity. At exactly 3:13 a.m., Theo was awakened by the unmistakable sound. Crunch. Crunch beneath the floorboards. His eyes flew open, heart hammering. Snow had drifted in from the storm, dusting the hardwood floor. Theo's hands shook as he reached for the fire axe he had positioned by the bed. Silence. Then scraping, deliberate, rhythmic. Someone carving into the foundation. Theo didn't hesitate. He smashed the floorboards with the axe, splinters flying, exposing a tunnel freshly dug beneath the cabin. The air was thick, carrying the scent of earth, frost, and decay. From the darkness of the crawl space, a gloved hand shot out, clutching a Polaroid. Theo snatched it up, and his blood ran cold. It was him, asleep last night, photographed from inside the bedroom. Theo, to audience, voice tight, eyes wide, he's been under me, breathing my air, watching my every move. All this time, I wasn't alone. The intruder emerged from the crawl space, rising with a slow, deliberate grace. Frost crusted his bandages, which wrapped his face completely, leaving only milky eyes visible. Eyes that knew Theo, eyes that carried a memory of his childhood, of secrets no one should have known. And then, in a voice low and almost tender, he whispered Theo's childhood nickname. The air seemed to thicken, the cabin itself trembling with the weight of fear. Theo swung the axe with every ounce of his strength. It connected and missed. The intruder was gone again, slipping back into the crawl space, leaving only the echo of his whisper. Panic surged, replaced by resolve. He poured kerosene into the tunnel, igniting it. Flames roared beneath the cabin, licking the floorboards, turning the crawl space into a furnace of light and smoke. The man had to be stopped or buried. Theo fled into the blizzard, axe in hand, snow freezing his feet. Visibility was near zero, the wind tearing at him with unrelenting force. Behind him, the cabin was consumed in fire, tunnel collapsing in on itself, a roar of destruction that seemed both triumphant and hollow. Rescue teams would arrive eventually, but the truth of the night was far darker. What burned beneath the ash was not just timber. Beneath the charred remains lay a journal. At first glance, it appeared to be Theo's handwriting, but the entries were not his. The style was too precise, the observations too intimate. And the last entry chilled him beyond reason. He escaped. I'll wear his skin until he returns. Theo, to audience, frostbitten, eyes wild, the footprints were mine. I've been hunting myself. Every fear, every whisper, every shadow, I made him. Or he made me. And the blizzard doesn't care. It hides nothing and everything. The storm raged, indifferent to human terror. Snowdrifts formed around him, creating shifting mazes, masking threats, and revealing none. Theo's mind was a battlefield. Reality, nightmare, memory, and terror collided, leaving him both hunted and hunter, unsure where he ended and the intruder began. The mountains seemed to echo with a laughter he could not hear, but could feel deep in his chest. And in the distance, hidden by the storm's fury, a faint glint of red, an impossible alien presence. The headlights of the Red Wraith, far from Romania now, idled somewhere in the wilderness, waiting. Somewhere else, a knife dripped. Footprints circled endlessly, a looping dance of obsession, terror, and inevitability. Theo understood the cruel, inescapable truth. The game had no end. The hunter and the hunted were one. Segment 2. Theo didn't sleep. Not anymore. Each gust of wind rattling the cabin's glass walls felt like a whisper, each crack of ice underfoot like the intruder's deliberate approach. Snowdrifts piled high against the structure, freezing doors and windows into unyielding barriers. The fire in the hearth cast long, flickering shadows, but no warmth could reach him. Every shadow seemed to move independently, stretching and twisting, waiting for him to falter. The prints around the cabin had changed. They no longer circled neatly on the snow. They led to the deck, disappeared, reappeared beneath it. Someone had been hiding, patient, meticulous, breathing under the cabin for days without leaving a trace. Theo's mind replayed every creak, every sound he had ignored, and his pulse quickened with dread. Theo, to audience, day 5. They stop, and yet I know. I can feel the air shift. The floorboards above, the walls around me. I am not alone. Never alone. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the sound returned. Crunch. Crunch, beneath the floorboards. Theo gripped the fire axe, muscles taut, every sense heightened to the point of agony. The scraping beneath him was slow, deliberate, as though the intruder wanted him to hear, to fear, to anticipate. And when he smashed the floor again, he revealed a tunnel, carved fresh, running directly under the cabin. The intruder's hand shot out from the crawl space, gloved, clutching a Polaroid. Theo seized it, and terror gripped him. Another photo of himself asleep the previous night, taken from the bedroom. Someone had been watching him, breathing his air, existing in his space, without ever revealing themselves. The realization struck like a blade. He had been hunted while thinking he was the hunter. From the darkness, the figure rose. Bandages crusted with frost wrapped the intruder's face, leaving only milky, blank eyes visible. The whisper of Theo's childhood nickname cut through the roar of the blizzard. Theo, to audience, voice trembling, he knows me. Every memory, every fear, every secret buried in the years. He is me, or I am him. I cannot tell which anymore. Theo swung the axe, striking the tunnel's edge. The intruder slipped back into the crawl space, eluding capture. Flames roared beneath the cabin as Theo poured kerosene into the tunnel, igniting it with a match. Smoke filled the cabin, stinging eyes and throat. But he could not stop. The fire had to consume the intruder, or at least force him to retreat. The cabin groaned under the heat, timber popping, glass windows quivering. Theo fled into the blizzard, axe in hand, feet cutting through deep snow. The wine screamed, snow stung his face, and visibility dropped to nothing. Behind him, the cabin burned, flames licking at the frozen earth, smoke curling into the grey sky. But the terror was not behind him. It was inside him. Every step into the snow was a reminder that he had been watched, that the intruder had lived in the same space, breathed the same air, and studied him to perfection. Rescue arrived hours later, following the signal from a satellite phone Theo had managed to activate. They found the cabin engulfed, the tunnel collapsed under fire. Amid the ashes lay a journal. At first glance, it seemed to be Theo's own handwriting. But the entries were wrong. The observations, the descriptions, the intimate knowledge, too precise, too invasive. And the final entry struck him like ice. He escaped. I'll wear his skin until he returns. Theo, to audience, frostbitten, voice wild, the footprints were mine. I've been hunting myself. Every fear, every whisper, every shadow, I made him. Or he made me. And the blizzard doesn't care. It hides nothing and everything. The storm outside raged with relentless fury. Snow and ice formed shifting labyrinths, both masking and revealing threats. Theo's mind teetered on the edge of reason. Hunter, hunted, and reflection were impossible to separate. The mountains seemed alive with mockery, each gust echoing laughter only he could hear. And somewhere, hidden by the storm's fury, faint glints of red appeared. The Aheen, far from Romania now, idled silently in some distant darkness, headlights flickering like dying eyes. A knife dripped, glinting somewhere in the storm. Footprints circled endlessly in snow and ash, repeating a ritual of obsession, terror, and inevitability. Theo understood, fully and cruelly, the game was eternal. Theo, to audience, voice low, almost a whisper, the intruder, the reflection, the twin in the shadows, they are me. I am him, and the mountains will remember. I will remember. The blizzard, the snow, the footprints, they never forget. Neither can I. Hours passed. Theo huddled in a temporary shelter, soaked, frostbitten, axe in hand. The terror was not immediate, not visible. But he could feel the intruder's presence in every gust of wind, every reflection in ice, every sound swallowed by the storm. Sleep would not come. Not here. Not in this place. Not in the same way ever again. And then, faint but unmistakable, the echo of metal scraping against timber, somewhere beyond the line of sight, under snow and ice, waiting. Theo's pulse thundered in his chest, and he realized that the intruder had not vanished. He was everywhere and nowhere, a shadow in the storm, a reflection in snow. Theo's terror was complete, perfect, eternal. Segment 3. The blizzard had become an extension of Theo himself. Each gust of wind, each swirl of snow, each howl across the ridges felt alive, aware, almost malevolent. He trudged through knee-deep snow, axe in hand, frost biting through his clothes, teeth chattering, lungs burning. The fire that had consumed the cabin was now only embers buried under snow and ash, leaving behind the remnants of a terror he could not fully comprehend. But the terror was not gone. It had never been gone. The footprints returned, circling endlessly, overlapping, impossible to trace, yet they were familiar. They were his own. Every footprint, every mark in the snow, carried a story, a memory, a haunting. He realized with horrifying clarity that the intruder had not been just a man, not just a shadow. He had been a part of Theo all along. A reflection, a twin forged from fear, obsession, and the darkest corners of his mind. Theo, to audience, voice trembling, wild, every footprint I see, every shadow I hear, it is me. Or I am it, and the blizzard keeps score. The wind screamed through the ridges, snow pelting his face, disorienting him. Yet he moved forward, senses sharpened, mind alert, each step measured. He knew the intruder had vanished for now, but patience was part of his method. The man, or the reflection, was patient, meticulous, waiting for the perfect moment. And Theo, exhausted, frostbitten, terrified, understood that there would never be a moment when he was truly safe. He returned to the remains of the cabin, scanning the ashes for the journal. It had survived, hidden beneath charred rubble, as though the fire itself had been selective, sparing only what it could not destroy. The pages, blackened at the edges, contained entries in his handwriting, but not his style. The observations were too precise, too intimate, every detail of his life catalogued with obsessive care. And the last entry froze his blood. He escaped. I'll wear his skin until he returns. Theo, to audience, voice breaking, frostbitten, eyes wide, the intruder, the twin, at the reflection, it is me. And yet it is not. Every fear, every secret, every thought I buried, he has claimed. And the snow, the blizzard, the mountains, they do not care. They witness. They remember. I am hunted, and I am the hunter, and yet I am only the prey. Theo stumbled through the storm, following the circling footprints, each loop a grotesque echo of his own movements. The snow shifted, revealing glimpses of frozen trees, jagged rocks, and remnants of the burned cabin. He realized that the intruder had left signs, traces, not of malice, but of presence, of inevitability. This was not just a hunt. It was a lesson in terror, in mirrored existence. He understood, with bone-deep dread, that his own shadow had become an agent of fear. Theo, to audience, voice low, measured, horrified, I have seen him. I have fought him. I have set fire to the space he inhabits. And yet, he is me. And I am him. There is no escape. Not in snow, not in fire, not in sleep. Only the endless circling, the footprints, the echo of my own terror. The storm intensified, snow whipping sideways, turning the world into a white void. Theo trudged forward, axe raised, senses straining for the slightest movement. Then he heard it. A faint metallic cling beneath the snow, a whisper of motion beneath his boots. He froze, breath ragged, snow stinging his eyes. From the whiteness emerged a faint silhouette, bandages crusted with frost, milky eyes staring. The intruder rose slowly, deliberately, stepping into the storm like a phantom made real. Theo's instinct screamed. He swung the axe. Frost and snow sprayed into the void, but the figure vanished, slipping back into the snow and wind. The storm seemed to swallow him, leaving only the echoes of his own fear. Theo realized, fully, that this was not a physical confrontation. The intruder existed as much in mind as body, a reflection of his deepest fears, inseparable from his own essence. And then, in the swirling white, a glint of impossible red, headlights far off, shining dimly through the storm. The red aheen, waiting. Somewhere, a knife dripped, metal whispering against ice. Footprints circled endlessly in the snow, in the ashes, in the mind. Theo understood the cruel truth. This cycle would continue. The intruder would always return, the hunt would never end, and the reflection, the twin, the mirror of himself would haunt him forever. Theo, to audience, frostbitten, voice low, haunted, the cabin burned. The tunnel collapsed. The journal remains. Footprints circle endlessly. Somewhere in the storm, the red aheen waits. Somewhere, a knife drips. And I am both hunter and hunted. I am both Theo and him. And the blizzard will scream for eternity. Theo stumbled down the mountain, axe in hand, frost-bitten and wild-eyed. He understood the final truth. He could flee, he could survive. But the intruder was not just outside. The intruder was him. Every reflection, every memory, every fear became the stalker, the twin, the hunter. There was no hiding from what was already inside. The mountain stretched endlessly, white and frozen, unyielding. The wind carried with it a metallic tang, a whisper of footsteps, and the faint glow of red headlights far, far away. Theo's breath misted in the air. Every heartbeat echoed against the mountains, every thought a reflection, every fear made real. Theo, to audience, voice breaking, nearly a whisper, the footprints were mine. The snow remembers. The fire remembers. I remember. And he waits. Always. Forever. The blizzard screams. Somewhere, a knife drips. Footprints circle endlessly. And I am not safe. I never was. The curtain falls as the storm roars, snow swirling in infinite patterns, the mountains bearing witness, and somewhere, endlessly circling, the red aheen idols. Footprints vanish and reappear in a cruel loop, a dance of terror and reflection. The hunter and hunted, mirror and self, merge and dissolve into the white chaos. The night rages, relentless, eternal, unyielding.